Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and that's right, I am finally reviewing, I'll just go ahead and say this. I had no idea, was not aware, and did not expect that we were getting a season 2 of this really good documentary series on Disney Plus. Yeah, because I had of course reviewed the first season, and yeah, the first season was excellent, and so I didn't really expect that at some point we were going to get a season 2. You know, not to mention, perfect timing for season 2 to be out the year that one of the best visual effects houses of the film industry celebrating their anniversary. So that's right, guys. Season 2 of the documentary on Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM for short. Light and Magic. Yes, Season 2 of Light and Magic. Oh, yes. Yeah, like I said, I had no idea and was not aware that at some point we were going to get a Season 2. And again, the fact that perfect timing, Season 2 coming out the year of ILM's anniversary, when it all began in 1975. Now, a little recap on Season 1, because yeah, Season 1 was excellent. The early beginnings of ILM, when Star Wars gave birth to ILM, and they achieved visual effects like nobody had seen before. And it was not just for science fiction stuff, okay? Because George Lucas created Industrial Light and Magic for any movie that required fantastic, detailed special effects, rather if it be, say, practical, or in the very later years of ILM, computer animation, computer visual effects, you name it. And of course, the later films that ILM would do, besides the next 2 Star Wars films after the first one, you know, then would come, say, Indiana Jones, E.T., then very later on, say, Willow, when it started using computer animation. The same goes for Young Sherlock Holmes, sorry. I almost thought I got my Sherlock Holmes movies mixed up, but no. Young Sherlock Holmes, The Glass-Stained Knight, and very later on, with ILM using computers, most notably Terminator 2, and most prominently, a big highlight for ILM, Jurassic Park. And in the very later years, in the 90s, early 2000s, and up to the 2010s, the more advanced computer animation would become, visuals just, yeah, amazing. Bringing creatures and making stuff explode, no matter what it is, on screen, living, breathing. Just amazing. Yeah, just, again, Season 1, fantastic. And now that we have Season 2, I don't know, because look, as much as I enjoyed Season 1, I think Season 2 was probably my favorite season. Yeah, because we really get into some awesome, juicy stuff. And Season 2, heavily establishing and talking about when computers came in, and when using computer visual effects, animation, bringing whatever creature, like if it's a dragon or an alien species in a galaxy far, far away, come to life, making ships computer animated, blowing stuff up like explosions, destroying something, just, yeah. And when the use of motion capture, or when ILM at a certain point would do their very first animated feature film, and we know what that is. Just overall, I really enjoyed Season 2, and the fact that there's only 3 episodes, well, you know what? It did not disappoint with what the only 3 episodes of Season 2 had to offer. And this is where they talk more about, say, the prequels. I mean, you know, keep in mind, because Star Wars having a huge part of ILM, so of course they have to talk a lot about Star Wars, not to mention what they would bring to Episode 1, and when the time finally came for George for the prequels, starting with Episode 1, to be underway. When the technology really came in, and it was really looking good. Yeah, but just overall, Season 2, it was extraordinary. And Yeah, I even, like, did a rewatch of this before, as of now, I'm doing my review, because I, of course, seen it, but I had to watch season 2 again. I mean, not just for the fun of it, but obviously because to still fresh in my mind, but yeah, I think I've got it. So yeah, again, season 2, excellent. And any of you that have watched Light and Magic, starting with season 1, and have made your way to season 2, oh yeah. And again, it's great, perfect opportunity, for season 2 coming out the year of ILM's anniversary. ILM having a big year. So yeah, everything Lucasfilm, from ILM to Lucasfilm Animation, Okay, so, as always, read the description / the story. Let's get into the episodes themselves. So, episode 1, are we ready for this? Description / the story. After a decade away from Star Wars, George Lucas is ready to test the digital tools he has been developing with The Phantom Menace. But is ILM capable of realizing Lucas's vision? So, Episode 1, this is where Season 2 begins, and up to the 90s, where computers started to come in, and them doing, say, Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, but what would come next after, say, those two biggies with computer animation? The fact that more new faces that step into ILM, and the positions that they would be put in. Also, can't forget to mention this, that the director of all 3 episodes of Season 2, Joe Johnston, nice. And there are a good chunk of times where, Joe is interacting with those he's interviewing, and they're interviewing back, why not? Besides, Joe, of course, having a huge part in ILM. But so where to start off? Well, obviously, when digital technology came in, and with computers and everything, especially, George, always looking to push further to the next level and the new generation of filmmaking. And when new systems came in, new technology came in for Lucasfilm, like Edit Droid, and, when it came to THX and audio mixing, that kind of tools that would be incorporated straight from Lucasfilm. And when it would come to, say, the next films where we would have CG characters be on screen, most prominently, the next ones to come after, say, Terminator 2 and most notably Jurassic Park, we had Casper and we had Dragonheart. Starting with Casper, because there was never a key character where it was computer animated entirely for the whole movie. And what was brought to Casper, and according to those that talk about Casper, like Ben Burtt and such, And when it came to Dragonheart, and especially whom came into ILM in 93, but he would then find himself going big, where he would become a animation director and such, and guiding those on, how to animate the characters, and by bringing them to life. Rob Coleman, yes. We finally see Rob Coleman, and, his early experience when he came to ILM, and when he would be put to the task to be a director of animation. And, of course, for him, one of the biggest things that he first did was Dragonheart. And the fact that, having Sean Connery voicing a dragon named Draco, and the task to bring this dragon to life seemed impossible, but ILM found a way. Especially, they made a new software system, which being called Carrie. A nickname for the new animation software, facial animation software, I should say, Caricature, Carrie for short, and it was developed by Carrie Phillips. And, this being this software intentionally, developed for Dragonheart, and turns out, and luckily, that this software, and after doing it for Dragonheart, would become very popular, and it was used for a wider range of animation, and including secondary animation like breathing and skin jiggling, because even with what Rob Coleman explains on bringing that dragon to life, facial movements, or just the breathing of the neck, and just, facial nerves, like twitches or something, just, the skin moving of a dragon, amazing. And in order for the dragon to also be lip-synced to the dialogue of Sean Connery, so the audiences can see and believe that, yeah, this voice is coming out of this dragon. And like a few fun facts that Rob Coleman shares about when it came to working with Sean Connery recording for the dragon, because yeah, learning that Sean Connery, when he would talk and with a sentence, like one mouth, like his mouth would like move from here to here, just, oh yes, very interesting. I mean, maybe you guys know this, and yeah, and the fact that they incorporated that into the dragon character, extraordinary. I mean, besides, yeah, I mean, the dragon in Dragonheart, almost like having a likeness to Sean Connery. I mean, it's obvious and it's common for some characters, but yeah, for animated characters and whom is voicing that animated character, I mean, it does depend. And yeah, even like, say, when they took an audio clip from Dr. No, the mentioning of dragons, there's no such thing as dragons, using that as test footage to show Sean Connery, just, yeah. And George Lucas himself, having seen what ILM was doing from Casper, Jurassic Park, he knew that at some point, and when those films came along, that just near the fact that, you know, at some point, the Star Wars prequels were going to be underway, and it wasn't until Dragonheart, when George saw that dragon come to life, he knew that now was the time for ILM to do Phantom Menace. They're ready. Yep. And, yeah, so... And by the way, because Episode 1, well, because obviously they have to talk about the other movies that they've done besides Star Wars, but yeah, the rest of Episode 1, it centers a lot. It only focuses on Phantom Menace. And again, I think we get that, right? Because, yeah, Star Wars, being a part of ILM, just, yeah, you know the logic, but then the math, but anyways. So yeah, when it came to Phantom Menace, and man, the challenges that were put on those at ILM, from John Knoll, Rob Coleman, and even like new faces that would step in, like, and I was happy to see that he got to be a part of this, and rightfully so. Yeah, rightfully so. I gotta slow down talking. Rick McCallum, yeah, good old Rick McCallum. He was basically, and best described by those at ILM, he was George Lucas's second hand or something, you know, and took care of everything, like, you know, for George at times, you know, when needed to. And yeah, of course, Rick McCallum, having been a producer on the Star Wars prequel trilogy. And yeah, some of those at ILM and their experience working with Rick was pretty funny. Even like one of them describing him as like considering him like a mob boss or something, you know. And by the way, because those that you know, that are in Episode 1 and whom we see, because yeah, as I mentioned, like John Knoll, Rob Coleman, but also Doug, what's his last name? Yeah, Doug Chiang. Yeah, because when he would come into ILM in 95, and, you know, him being inspired by, well, when he saw Star Wars, but also Joe Johnston was one of his inspirations, being an artist and doing sketches, yeah, and that was nice and sweet, and when he brought that up to Joe directly, of course. And when Doug came in, and, well, he was put in the spotlight for being a designer on the Phantom Menace, with the ships and the battle droids, everything. George made it clear to Doug that it's going to be entirely different, fresh, and new. I mean, of course. And yeah, that putting Doug on some pressure, but he managed to succeed, even when he, like, drew the first concept artworks, sketch, design for the battle droids, the B-1s, which according to him looked terrible, but, you know, that was just the beginning of what would become the clumsy, clanking battle droids in the prequels. Also, yeah, to mention some of the others that, some of them that do appear in Episode 1, Jim Morris, whom was president of ILM from 94 to 2005. Yeah, it's great to see that, yeah, rightfully so, that he came back, and of course for this documentary. Also, I mentioned John Knoll, also Lauren Peterson, of course, and Dennis Muren, and Jen Botel, if I'm saying her full name right? Yeah, because, yeah, her being a digital artist, basically, so, yeah. And, yeah, Doug Chen, I like that. That's good, because IMDb listing, you know, the positions they do in ILM. That's great. Because, yeah, Doug Chen, art department, John Knoll, visual effects supervisor, yeah. And also, to mention about John Knoll some more, because, yeah, John Knoll, another genius at ILM, without a doubt. And one of the big guys of ILM, without a doubt. Yeah, because, like, stuff that's centered on him, and when it came to him being attached with the first installment of the prequel trilogy, and having developed this new software system of computer animation. If I remember to do so, yeah, because, yeah, I should. I'll put a text right here, so yeah. So, like, this, like, and also the mentioning of the Rebel unit, and apparently, according to John, this started with Star Trek Generations, and John mentioning that he had gone to SIGGRAPH and was very interested in the CGI stuff, and what he would bring to ILM, an easy desktop, you know, software to use, and the fact that he first started this with, you know, building the Enterprise D in Generations, then it would come to, say, First Contact, and then, when it came to the re-release of the original trilogy, the special edition, yeah, from the Millennium Falcon, the X-Wings, TIE Fighters, new models built for them, this time CG, for some certain shots, and, yeah, just more stuff added, and certain things that George was not impressed with, because, you know, keep in mind, George Lucas was not really satisfied with the final results of how the special effects looked. Like, not all of them, just a few that, yeah, it bugged him, most notably in A New Hope. But when it came to 97 with the special edition, yeah, things that didn't satisfy him, and they were not what he really envisioned, they were fixed. Yeah, like the mentioning of Luke's speeder bike, you know, in Tatooine, and so on, and expanding Mos Eisley, just, yeah. So, like, coming into, say, Phantom Menace, and using that software, and the fact, because, you know, for some shots, like, some of the spaceships, the planets, like Coruscant, and just, yeah. And also, because, yeah, with the models that were built for Phantom Menace, like, especially for John, because him being responsible for the pod race stadium, you know, the arena and such, like, that being a model, and seeing it in the behind-the-scenes diary videos, you know, which we get to see in Season 2. We see more never-before-seen video diaries recorded when they were making the prequel trilogy. So, with the pod race arena, because, yeah, them building the model, and when George came in for a VFX review, he was brought in to check out the model for the pod race sequence, and he didn't have a reaction to it, but it wasn't until an hour later when he was just raving over it, just, you know, in awe about it, and getting some others at ILM to go check out the model, even according to Jim Morris. And yeah, like, when it came to, say, the pod racers, like, yeah, that being a biggie for ILM, and the fact, because, you know, and as I'm sure some of you know, the pod race being inspired by the chariot race in Ben-Hur, and also the fact that the pod racers have to crash, and so much is flying, the debris and the parts from the pod racers, well, like, looking at footage of those specific race vehicles, you know, when they crash, like, yeah. And, you know, it was not easy, obviously, for those at ILM, but they achieved it, you know. It was tricky, but they succeed. But also, the big highlight in Episode 1 of Season 2, and when it comes to Phantom Menace, bringing a digital CG character to life on screen with live people. And like I said earlier, when it came to Dragonheart, that's when George then realized that now is the time to do so. And when it came to Phantom Menace, and them doing a computer-animated alien creature, bringing it to life, and alongside with live actors. Now, because that they technically already did this before, and they succeeded, from, say, Casper, The Flintstones, Dragonheart, Jurassic Park, and Mars Attacks. But Phantom Menace, it was quite different. It really was. And, of course, that being Jar Jar Binks. Misa, Misa! Okay. But on a positive note of Jar Jar, because, look, even if Jar Jar was not a well-loved character from the beginning, there's no denying that ILM pulled it off. They succeeded on bringing a really nice, detailed, computer-animated creature to life in the world of Star Wars. Now, it's obvious that, for George, he wanted to do that at some point. In the original trilogy, we had an alien creature who was practically there, and that, of course, being Chewbacca the Wookiee. But, at a certain point, George wanting to do something different this time, and when the technology came underway and was looking good with computer animation, bringing whatever it is to life on screen, now the opportunity came to do that and achieve it. Have an alien creature with live people be CG and computer animated. And, when developing Jar Jar, and, because Jar Jar went through so many different designs and looks, animals combined from, say, an elephant, what's it called again? I can't place it. It's right at the tip of my tongue, but I think you know. But from elephant, alligator, frog, pig. The pig part didn't last long. Eventually they managed to get the right look and design for Jar Jar. Not to mention, Jar Jar was inspired by Buster Keaton. And whom it was that they found to be Jar Jar, to bring this character to life, would be none other than good old Ahmed Best. Yes, and Ahmed Best, who appears in this documentary, Season 2. Yeah, it was great to see him. So, when being discovered by those at ILM, because, he was performing on stage in San Francisco, and when he was discovered, he was brought in, and, because I believe it was, because someone big at ILM, and to mention some of the others that, do appear in episode 1 some more, Ben Burt, I think Chrissy England? I think so, but, and just in case if there will be a text, just, but anyway, so my point being is that, when Ahmed Best was discovered and brought in for an audition, and, Ahmed Best didn't care, what it was at first, and he was just more than happy to do this. Star Wars? Are you kidding? And when meeting George, and when going through, the details of this character and what they were attempting to do, and he had the perfect slender body, for this character. And when it came to building a suit for Ahmed, originally, they were attempting for the body to be practical while replacing Ahmed's head with a CG head, because he would wear a headpiece of Jar Jar, a virus would cover his eyes, so, the actors are not looking directly at him, they're looking at Jar Jar's face with that cap he has, and, this seemed like it could have worked, it seemed as though, because with what they were going for, and maybe even the mentioning of, they might do a bit of CG on his hands, and also there were green dots, so they know that where to swap his actual head with a CG head of Jar Jar. And everything was going pretty well, even when Ahmed Best met with Rob Coleman, who was in charge of directing those who were going to animate Jar Jar, as well as the other computer animated characters like the Gungans, Watto, Jabba, and so on, and Sebulba. And at a certain point, and John Knoll, especially him, really wanted to go for a full-blown computer-animated version of Jar Jar, and turns out that the results of when it came to animating Jar Jar, just the head, it was not what they were expecting. This would have taken man-hours and just, ugh. But, with the fully computer-animated Jar Jar, it was much quick and it didn't take that long. So, yeah. So eventually, yeah, they ended up going with the computer animated Jar Jar. But the problem was, George, despite then going along with the idea of using a full-blown computer animated version of Jar Jar, he didn't want to get rid of Ahmed entirely. But they figured it all out a little later on when it came to motion capture. So then, later in Phantom Menace's production, they brought back Ahmed to do some motion capture performance, once again having some dots around him, and what would be incorporated into the character of Jar Jar. So, yeah, great to see. And the more talk about Phantom Menace and, like, say, when it came to the pod racing, and, you know, they did some test footage. Ben Burtt got one of his kids to, you know, be Anakin for the test footage and such, and yeah, it's great to see that. I remember, like, seeing that in the bonus features of the making of the Phantom Menace, you know, Disc 2, but having to see more of it, and the fact that that was Ben Burtt's son. But yeah, but just overall, they managed to succeed with what they brought to Phantom Menace, and yeah, like, Rob was under a lot of stress, but at the same time, like, you know, because of the deadline for Phantom Menace, and with how long they had until the film was complete and when it had to be released, because Rob, he was at one point getting worried about, like, say, all the people who were ambitious for the new Star Wars film. And when he shared this with George, when George noticed and sensed that, yeah, something was up with Rob, and he was upset, and George made it clear that, you know, you don't have to worry about them. You have to worry about me, and you're doing a good job. Yeah, George making it very clear and patching and, you know, cheering up Rob that it's all good. He's been doing an excellent job, and they've been succeeding. And even when, after that, according to Rob, when going home to bed, he slept like a baby. Hey, that's a good sign right there. But yeah, but to speed things up, because yeah, when eventually Phantom Menace came out, yeah, and everybody was so excited for it. Yeah, seeing the footage of all the Star Wars fans attending the premiere of Phantom Menace. And then, when the results came in at Lucasfilm, the reviews, the receptions, everything, from New York Times and so on, yeah, I'm not kidding, because Episode 1, that's where it ends off. Like, when they got in the reception, the reviews of Phantom Menace, and to see if, yeah, it was acclaimed very well, yeah, just, we knew what was coming, and, like, we, of course, by now knew and what was to come for Phantom Menace when it came out, and just, yeah, boom, because the episode ends off on that, and thus, when diving into Episode 2, and yeah, Episode 2 of Season 2 of Light and Magic, but actually, yeah, Episode 1, it was a good episode and a great way to start off Season 2, so, yeah. So, Episode 2, There Must Be a Better Way. Description / the story. The Phantom Menace is a box office smash. Though the criticism takes its toll on those who made the film, ILM forges on with Attack of the Clones, which includes the task of bringing to life a CG Yoda. Okay, so, diving into Episode 2, well, still in 1999, the release of The Phantom Menace, but after Phantom Menace, and what ILM would do next when the early 2000s rolled in. Yep. Well, starting with The Phantom Menace, it was finished, completed, and when it was released, yeah, when everybody was thinking that this was going to be epic, the first Star Wars film since 1983. Besides, like, say, the Ewok movies, but yeah. Yeah, but unfortunately, while it did pretty well to some, and, you know, everybody was praising some great things that came from The Phantom Menace, overall, just, it didn't look that good. Especially, this was pinned on Jar Jar. Yes, of course. Yeah, so, not what they were expecting. All that time they spent trying their best to bring a computer-animated creature to life, and they succeeded. They did a heck of a great job, the final results of it. and how the audience reacted, the whole world reacted to Jar Jar in 1999, not that great. And when it came to the interviews from Rick McCallum, Rob Coleman, and when, Ahmed Best, attending, one of the premieres and seeing it in theaters, or, being interviewed by some guys at a table, it was not looking too good. And some things that were pointed out definitely from George, Rob Coleman, and Ahmed Best. From George, because George was responsible. He was one of those that was responsible for bringing Jar Jar to life, and what he wanted to bring to the character of Jar Jar, and wanting Jar Jar to be more dopey and such, and pointing out, especially to Joe Johnson, that when the first Star Wars film came out, and it's true according to George, there was a time when people did not like C-3PO. They hated him. They couldn't stand him. When it came to, say, Yoda wasn't mentioned in this. I don't know, but I know it was mentioned by George and something else. But yeah, people didn't like Yoda at first because he talked backwards a lot. And then when it came to, say, Return of the Jedi, which, by the way, Joe Johnson was responsible for the concept art of the Ewoks, that the people couldn't stand the Ewoks, and them being cute and such. But, at the same time, the Ewoks, they were tough warriors. Because, when we see them in action, taking down those stormtroopers. And yeah, George pointing out to Joe, because, about the Ewoks, that was pretty funny. And also, Rob Coleman explaining, because, and even when he talked to George, that nobody likes the character of Jar Jar. And according to Rob, George stated to Rob that they don't like the character, but they got a kick out of, the fact that there's this computer animated character living, breathing on screen with live people. Yeah, everybody got a kick out of that, despite the fact that, well, Jar Jar, And for Ahmed, yeah, and as I technically did bring up already, because, yeah, it wasn't just Ahmed who was responsible for bringing Jar Jar to life. ILM was, and George Lucas. They were Jar Jar as well, as Ahmed puts at it. And yeah, but the fact that he most notably was responsible for bringing that character to life, playing that character, the movements and everything, he felt that he let everyone down. And yeah, it's amazing that, it seemed as though that, yeah, Ahmed was comfortable, was all right, was perfectly all right bringing this up, because yeah, a big thing in his moment in his life, and when it came to Jar Jar, yeah, it had an effect on Ahmed at one point after the release of Phantom Menace, where people didn't like the character, and he felt it was his fault. Let those at ILM and George Lucas, letting them down and so on. And there was a disclaimer when Episode 2 began. I'm sure you know this by now, any of you that have watched Season 2 and with Episode 2, that, yeah, Ahmed Best bringing up the subject where at one point he was considering suicide. And, yeah, because, I knew about this, but for me, I didn't know the full detail. I'm sure a lot of us didn't, but when it came to this, where, yeah, for a while, Ahmed is talking about what happened when, yeah, he felt very depressed. And at a moment, he wanted to end things, because when he was out in New York in the evening, according to him, and from his point of view, everything was dead silent. It was all quiet. It's like nobody was outside where he was. He was at a bridge in New York. He could see the Statue of Liberty, and at that time, the Twin Towers. Everything dead silent. And he was leaning on a bridge. And, yeah, considering on killing himself. But then, something happened. And according to Ahmed, a gust of wind out of nowhere, whoosh, blew him and just, basically, getting him to not end his life. And with that, something snapped in him. He woke up, and everything came to life in New York. The noise and the people and so on. New York being lit up, and just, yeah, even when he laughed at one point, and what am I doing? And then him being scared, and he was happy to be scared because he knew that, well, he wanted to live. And, man, it's hard to believe because how how much it affected Ahmed. But hey, in the later years, things would get better. Even when Rob pointed this out that, the Star Wars fans at that time, and they were not satisfied with The Phantom Menace. Well, those fans were those who were kids when Star Wars first began. And, well, at a certain point, the kids, the young Star Wars fans who loved Phantom Menace, and they especially loved Jar Jar, those fans who would grow up and, very later on, 10 years to come, etc., Jar Jar got more praise, and so did Ahmed. Got more love and appreciation than, how it was not too good in 1999. But just, things did get better eventually. It took a while, but it got better. So that's great to see. I mean, poor Ahmed, because with what he went through, but at a certain point, he recovered. And it's, no doubt because, even still this day, having some love and appreciation for Jar Jar, even though that there are still those out there, obviously, that still can't stand him. But, in my opinion, this is me talking, Jar Jar never bothered me, okay? That's just me. And I know there are those out there like me who had no problem with Jar Jar. And besides, who's to say we can't have a funny, comedic relief in Star Wars, okay? We have to have those. But, sometimes it has to be done in a good way, because this is Star Wars we're talking about, okay? And I think for Jar Jar, the fact that George wanted Jar Jar to be more over the top, more dopey and such, hey, who can argue with the man himself, one of the fathers of Star Wars? Who can argue with George Lucas? It's what he wanted for that character and for Star Wars when, he did the prequels. So, But, just overall, that whole subject of Jar Jar and with Ahmed is, it's hard to believe, but again, something good would come very later on. So, All right, but anyway, so then what they talk about next, well, when it came to, say, some other films that were not Star Wars, like in 2000, The Perfect Storm, starring George Clooney, well, the achievement on bringing water to life, seemed impossible. But actually before that, when it came to Twister, Spielberg came to ILM and asking if they can achieve on bringing a Twister to life. So those two things that are heavily brought up, a good majority of those two things, bringing a Twister to life and water. And most notably, whom was responsible for bringing a Twister to life in, well, the movie Twister, was Habib Zargarpur, if I'm even pronouncing his full name right, if I'm butchering some of it, but again, he was the one that created the software for, computer animated particles, like this being used for, say, The Mask, Jim Carrey, in Jumanji, where whomever it is being sucked into the Jumanji game, and then when it came to Twister, when Spielberg approached ILM if they can achieve this, if they couldn't, then there's no movie, but if they could achieve it, which they did, then thus, we have a movie, and we did. And because even my mom, she experienced seeing Twister, and her, like many others in 1996, were impressed with the results of a Twister on screen. So the achievement on bringing a Twister to life, which, seemed impossible, but they succeed, even when they first started a test footage, and incorporating a Twister. Those from, say, Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, they were amazed by it when that test footage was over. They were just roaring, and just, oh my god, and So when it came to bringing it to life in Twister, extraordinary, outstanding for those at ILM. And of course, the movie itself turning out to be pretty good. A good story, and, with the cast and so on. But of course, most notably, the highlight of Twister is the Twister itself. Then after Twister, very later on, in 2000, when it came to The Perfect Storm, the achievement, if they could bring a Twister to life, then what say about water? And it seemed quite impossible at first, but hey, like before, with the past films they did in the 90s, where it seemed impossible, but they succeeded once again, with the rain and such, the rain, but also, most notably, the ocean in The Perfect Storm. And yeah, like those that worked on the Perfect Storm, and like most notably because one whom got involved with the digital effects, whom would be a digital effects artist, Polly In, yes. Also, it's great to see, and I love this, where we get to know those at ILM, and we get their backstory, where they grew up and when they would fall in love in the movie business with visual effects, like when each of them had seen Star Wars or Ray Harryhausen materials. Just, yeah, I mean, that goes for Rob Coleman, because having seen Star Wars, but also loving the work of Ray Harryhausen and those that would get the books on behind the scenes and facts, making these kind of movies, and yeah, and where this would lead them wanting to join and work at ILM, and the movies that they would find themselves involved in, and they would turn out to be extraordinary. Yeah. So yeah, from Polly In, but also Mazi Oka, if I'm pronouncing his full name right, whom would then go on to be an actor, most notably in Heroes. He started off being a digital effects artist at ILM, working on The Perfect Storm. And the talk they have about The Perfect Storm, bringing the ocean to life, and with the heavy storms in that movie, and by animating George Clooney's son being drowned and such, yeah, it was another achievement for good old ILM. Then when it came to, say, the next installment of the prequel trilogy of Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, oh yeah, because so much, like, Phantom Menace seemed impossible for ILM. They were put to the task, but yet again, they were put to the task this time really big, and yeah, so much computer animation. But at the same time, and of course it's brought up, there were more practical model sets than the previous Star Wars films, according to those at ILM. And even they pointed this out, where people, first said that it looked like the prequels had too much CG shots, and even with the buildings, but no, not entirely, because, keep in mind still that most of the buildings, like, say, the Geonosius Arena, or, the pod race stadium, and parts of the Jedi Temple, or Padme's apartment, those were practical models. Legit. Like, yeah, so, and when looking at the behind the scenes, it's extraordinary how they turned out in the final film. Also, one of the model builders, which being Enter Fawn Davis, yeah, whom, being a model shop artist, yes, and his background, and when he was in he loved Star Wars and, some other stuff that he had seen, and yeah, because when he would find his way in ILM and becoming a model shop artist. Also, not to mention that whom was responsible for, bringing the Twister to life, Habib. Not only was he influenced by, obviously, Star Wars, but he was definitely inspired by Blade Runner, which, being one of his favorite movies, and whom was responsible for bringing those models to life in Blade Runner. Yeah, so Blade Runner having a huge part in Hobbit's life, and him wanting to be in that industry. So yeah, but Fawn Davis, like him stepping into ILM and when working on the prequels, even Adam Savage was a part of the prequels. And that's a shame that we didn't get Adam Savage for this. Why couldn't he be a part of this documentary? Because he was, for a while, a part of ILM, especially the prequels. Why couldn't they get him? I'd like to take a guess, probably, maybe they didn't have him in mind. Like, not intentionally, but maybe they just, you see, I could go into so much detail, but look, the documentary still turned out great, even if we didn't have more of those who were involved in ILM, and even, the prequels, and that goes for Adam Savage. Yeah, I don't want to go into a big fuss, I'm just simply saying. It would have been nice, but, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, when it came to Attack of the Clones, because, yeah, from so many more digital shots, and with the practical models, and not to mention, another biggie for those at ILM, bringing yet another character to life as a digital computer animated character. That being Yoda, of course. Yes, so, on the subject of Yoda for Attack of the Clones, yeah, because, well, when it came to Phantom Menace, Yoda started off being a puppet. They wanted to bring that back, and they did. But the problem was, yeah, people didn't really like how Yoda turned out in Phantom Menace. His look as a puppet, it wasn't the same as how it was done in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It didn't look real. It didn't look like Yoda. I mean, it did, but just not exactly just, no. I mean, you know, besides, this is supposed to be a slightly younger Yoda, right, in the era of the prequels, so, you know, go figure. But, yeah, so the results of Yoda in Phantom Menace didn't satisfy everybody, and, yeah, to the disappointment of George Lucas and, you know, hoping it could work again, but, yeah, bad luck, so. But, I mean, some of the other practical creatures that we see in Phantom Menace, like, you know, most notably on Tatooine, well, they looked pretty good, but yeah, you know, even like from a distance, Yaddle and Yarrow Poof, they looked pretty good too. So yeah, even Oppo Rancisis, but anyways. So when it came to Attack of the Clones, and not to mention Rob Coleman, from the beginning, wanted to do a computer-generated Yoda for Phantom Menace, but they went with the puppet. And seeing some more behind-the-scenes footage of good old Frank Oz coming back to puppeteer Yoda, and the fact that that puppet of Yoda for Phantom Menace, that especially was heavy for Frank, and yeah, a good majority of times where he couldn't keep his hand up that long. Just who can blame him? And some additional outtakes that we get of Frank Oz performing Yoda. I have one damn line. Just that's so funny, and that's so Frank Oz. You know, and that's the thing, because Frank Oz and the other fellow Muppeteers, like, when messing up a line or something, staying in character. And rightfully so, because, I mean, yeah, keeping those Muppets alive, and the same goes for Yoda. He's not a Muppet, so, but still, you know, he's still got to be alive in some way. So when it came to, say, Attack of the Clones, they were considering it at one point to do the puppet again, but despite the fact how badly Yoda turned out in Phantom Menace, and some certain things that were to happen in Attack of the Clones for Yoda, and because of a lightsaber duel that involves Yoda, that would have seemed impossible. So eventually, they went with bringing Yoda to life, this time digitally, as a computer-animated version, you know? And the fact that they tried their very best to incorporate what was brought from the puppet. Frank Oz's performance in, most notably, Empire Strikes Back. They did test footage. They even included the ear wiggling, which Frank Oz pointed out to Rob that they didn't really have to do that, but no, because they wanted to, because, you know, not just them, but for anybody else, that's what they remembered Yoda most notably. Like, one of those things that they remembered from Yoda was the ear wiggling. So, yeah, no harm done in that. And actually, honestly, this is me talking, I didn't really even notice the ear wiggling in episodes 2 and 3. Maybe I should look again, this time much better, but, you know, pay close attention, but anyways. So yeah, so the work and task that was put into bringing Yoda to life, this time as a computer-animated version of him, just, yeah, it was quite the challenge. But in the end, and in the final results of bringing Yoda to life, they succeeded. And even, like, yeah, bringing, like, the lip movement, you know, the lip syncing some, and the fact that Rob definitely brings this up at one point where, you know, directors wanting to cut to shots where we see characters not talking, but their facial reactions to something. And with that of Yoda in Empire, so doing that for Yoda in Attack of the Clones, like, there's one shot where Yoda looks at Palpatine, and according to Rob, you can see in Yoda's face and in his eyes that he doesn't really trust Palpatine. And the fact that that shot of Yoda would be used for one of the posters of Attack of the Clones, that's amazing. And even when, like, say, even I've seen this in the behind the scenes of, you know, bringing computer animated creatures to life in Star Wars, where, you know, one thing of Yoda is called the Widowmaker, where, you know, Yoda saying the dialogue, "Begun, this Clone War has." Because at one point he looked sad in his ears, but, you know, eventually that was fixed up. The ears stay up, and but yeah, just overall, the final results of bringing Yoda to life as a digital, you know, character, no longer being a puppet, this time being computer animated, turned out really good. But when it came to, say, the lightsaber duel, that was going to be very tricky. And Rob, once again, put to the task by George to do that. And even George describing to Rob, like, to picture the Tasmanian Devil. Well, I mean, there's a few shots where Yoda does spin a little, but yeah, I mean, probably not best to really go at it with, like, say, Tasmanian Devil, but yeah. Even when, like, George, like, brings up that Yoda being, like, the child of Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, like, Yoda hopping like a frog and such, and he's got, like, the fighting stuff, like, I guess Miss Piggy just... it's pretty funny. Also, not to mention that Ahmed Best, he had some involvement helping out Rob on bringing Yoda to life in action, because, yeah, where Ahmed came from, the stage performances, and not to mention, Ahmed showed Rob some anime stuff, you know, fighting and so on, and incorporating that into Yoda, even some Bruce Lee, some certain movements and so on, and the idea from someone at ILM that, you know, pulling back his robe, using the Force to grab his lightsaber, yeah. And then when the film itself came out, after all that hard work put in to Attack of the Clones, there is one more thing that that I almost forgot to mention. I can't forget to mention, but to finish up on the subject of Yoda, when Rob got to go to a screening of Attack of the Clones, and with a crowd, with an audience who didn't recognize him, Rob was very worried how they were going to react to Yoda in action, and Rob just sinking down in his seat. But when that came up, the lightsaber duel between Yoda and Count Dooku, the audience, according to Rob, roared. They loved it. You know, the same goes for my dad, because fun fact, when my dad got to see a screening of Attack of the Clones, the audience, like the audience that was there, when he went to see it, my dad, they went nuts too. That was a big highlight, one of the big highlights to come from Attack of the Clones, to see Yoda in action. And it's obvious because look, and how Yoda is established when we first see him in Empire Strikes Back, that he was once this strong, cutting Jedi warrior and such, you know what I mean? This powerful Jedi, and obviously, in the days of the Jedi Order, Yoda did wield a lightsaber and he was in action, right? And the fact that we get to see it. It's amazing. It really is. Yeah, just overall, because how Yoda turned out, the final results of bringing Yoda to life on screen as a digital computer animated character was excellent. Even Frank Oz, when at one point he sent a really good letter to Rob and the team who brought Yoda to life and was very satisfied with what they brought. Yeah. Okay, so one other thing to bring up, and yeah, because this was another big thing that occurred when Attack of the Clones happened. George Lucas wanted to do something new once again, and that being switching from film cameras to digital cameras. And that was something else that people were scared of. You know, I don't like change and so on. What are you doing, George? Like, God. But luckily, when George was very insistent on doing digital cameras, and with what they describe about digital cameras, better picture and, you know, very clear and so on, and this being done for Attack of the Clones, it turned out pretty well. And yeah, at a certain point, yeah, that started to die down. And even when after, say, the release of Episode 2, there was a digital summit, yeah, at Lucasfilm. There were a lot of people there that seemed to, by that point, wanted to go at it. Willingly wanting to go at it with digital cameras from Sony, and even like Panavision had some involvement too with like with lenses of the Sony cameras. Yeah, but point being is that yeah, at a certain point after the release of Episode 2, there was a meeting at Lucasfilm, the Digital Summit. Those like, say, Steven Spielberg, Gore Verbinski, Robert Rodriguez, Ron Howard, yeah, a lot of big-time directors who were there, they wanted to take a shot at it with the digital cameras, and thus, this would begin with using digital cameras. Yeah, and, well, further on for ILM and what would come next in the business of visual effects, and where, yeah, by the early 2000s, things were looking pretty good for computer animation, computer visuals, and when it also came to the digital cameras. So yeah, I mean, yeah, just overall, episode 2 of season 2 of Light and Magic. Yeah, There Must Be a Better Way, the title of episode 2. Yet another great episode, but yeah, what comes in episode 3 gets even better for ILM, and sadly, one part of ILM where, yeah, a good part of ILM, the era, you know, one great era for ILM that comes to an end at one point, especially after episode 3, just, yeah, not to mention when they would move to a different location, but yeah, more on that as I now dive into episode 3. So, episode 3, There's No Going Back. Yes, the third and final episode of season 2, and we're, yeah, further down the road for ILM. When the early 2000s rolled in, then the early 2010s, yeah, more big changes coming to ILM. Okay, so, description / the story. As competitors from around the globe vie for visual effects, Super Maisie, ILM completes George Lucas's prequel trilogy with an epic miniature model, advances the art with Pirates of the Caribbean, and reinvents, if I'm saying it right, animation on Rango. All right, so here we go, the third and final episode. And pretty much, with the description / the story I read, it summons up on what are the big things that are talked about in the third and final episode of Season 2. Revenge of the Sith, Pirates 1, 2, and 3, and Rango, when, at a certain point, ILM, they would do their very first computer animated film. Yes. Thanks to Gore Verbinski, with what he brought to the ILM team. And because, especially after having worked on the 3 pirate films and the next project that Gore Verbinski would do with good old ILM, Alright, so diving into episode 3, because, after, of course, with what's talked about in episode 2, and the results of the digital cameras, everybody else wanting to take a shot at it, doing digital cameras, from Spielberg, Verbinski, Rodriguez, Ron Howard, and so on. And what ILM would do next in the business of visual effects? Well, when it came to, say, Pirates of the Caribbean, that's the first thing that's brought up. Each of the members of ILM, from John Knoll to Hal T. Hickel, which I didn't talk about that much until now. I didn't bring up at all until now, because, Hal having a big part in ILM, and he's animation supervisor, because each of them at ILM being given a script of Pirates of the Caribbean, and at first, they think that this was not going to work. But when each of them read this script, it was good. And because with what Gore Verbinski, enter good old Gore Verbinski, with what he wanted to bring to the Pirates of the Caribbean films, and this being one of those first early Disney films based off of an attraction. And keep in mind, because before Pirates, we had, like, say, Tower of Terror, which was on the Disney Channel, the wonderful world of Disney. But we also had, like, say, Mission to Mars, which, of course, having to do with Mission Space. We had the Country Bears the year before Pirates, and that same year with Pirates, there was the Haunted Mansion. But Pirates, of course, it was the biggie, and what would come next for Pirates of the Caribbean, starting with Curse of the Black Pearl, because what went in for ILM doing the CG effects and such for Curse of the Black Pearl, from doing practical models of the ships to bringing an undead crew to life on the Black Pearl, and the fact that motion capture was used, and how they achieved, from, say, Barbossa and his Black Pearl crew, extraordinary, and by, how they did the skeletons, specifically of the Black Pearl crew, and it's extraordinary, it really is. And just, the fact that seen as though that Gore Verbinski had a great relationship with John Knoll and those at ILM, and what they achieved in Curse of the Black Pearl was extraordinary. Just like from the storyboards to, filming it, and when in post-production, they achieved the whole thing of the undead crew, the cursed crew of the Black Pearl, hence the title of the film. Even taking inspiration from Jason and the Argonauts, because those at ILM who love Ray Harryhausen, they love Jason and the Argonauts, so does Gore Verbinski. Not to mention, there were times that Ray Harryhausen himself did, once in a while, pay a visit to ILM, and he got to check out what was being done on Curse of the Black Pearl, seeing the skeletons be brought to life on screen, the undead crew of the Black Pearl, and Ray Harryhausen was satisfied with it. He was very delighted about it. He was pleased. And, when the film itself came out, unlike anything that anybody had seen, it was like a groundbreaking thing. It was like a game changer. So, yeah. Not to mention that, from Gore Verbinski and John Knoll, they loved pirate movies, those old pirate movies, and not to mention, their dads crossed paths because, like in this business that they were in, I'll remember to put a text, because that's important that I do so, because, some things I can't place and put it to words, especially for this. Anyways, but overall, with ILM doing the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, extraordinary, definitely. And then, them going straight into, and then, this is the next subject that's brought up, Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith even being more bigger, than, say, Phantom Menace and with Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones was big, but Revenge of the Sith even more. And, not to mention, to go ahead and bring this up because, where ILM where they were originally located, They were originally located at this place where this building was called Kerner Optical, And it was the original practical effects division of ILM, and it was called Kerner, so nobody could identify and see that, oh, this is ILM, this is where Star Wars is done. And that trick that ILM pulled, having it be called Kerner, it worked. They tricked everybody who would pass by that building. And even when, because it's almost like you're walking into a dentist's office. This doesn't look anything nice looking and such, but backstage further, they were really making the movie magic, just, and how most notably John Knoll puts at it. But anyways, putting all that magic on the big screen, the bucks and such, So where they were originally located, and they were first there in the 70s, and with the practical effects division and such, but and when it came to Revenge of the Sith, because what was brought into Revenge of the Sith, they especially dive into when it came to Mustafar. And, even when George Lucas brings this up, that in his vision, Mustafar being George Lucas's vision of hell, and, where Darth Vader comes from, where he would be born. And when it came to working on Mustafar, building a big model set of Mustafar, and the achievement of the lava effect, goo and such, glowing red, orange goo, I should say, and adding in, dirt or something to give it that rock chunk, feel to it, because it's lava. And the final results of that model and how it would look on screen, just extraordinary. But, of course, with a bit of CG effects with the model of Mustafar, it turned out to be excellent, and one of the most iconic lightsaber duels that we would see in Star Wars between the Master and the Apprentice, which of course being Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. And other things that they did bring up about Revenge of the Sith, but most notably the Mustafar planet. Most notably that. The more models that they built for Revenge of the Sith. Also, I forgot to bring this up, where when it came to the clones, starting with Attack of the Clones, they wanted to originally, and they were expecting that probably for the clones appearing on screen in Attack of the Clones, they would be live actors in practical suits. But George, he was insisting, and he got his way, to have the clones be digital. Nothing practical, they would be digital, and he got his way. End of discussion, bye-bye, that's what we're going for. And thus they did. And, you know, it still turned out pretty good. And when, yeah, they would do that yet again in Revenge of the Sith. And you're like, yeah, it would have been nice if they also talked a lot about General Grievous. Actually, because there's a couple of stuff that they did bring up, but they didn't go into full detail. Like, at one point, I think, yeah, in episode 1 of season 2, Galaxy Quest was brought up. But barely. They didn't talk, like, Galaxy Quest was not talked about that much, but, you know, it's basically, like, what they were doing and what they achieved, like, you know, with bringing computer-animated creatures to life, but also the fact that, you know, Galaxy Quest had some practical models, most notably the main ship of Galaxy Quest, yeah. So, yeah, like, but point being is that it would have been nice if they did go into some detail on General Grievous, because that was another crowning achievement in Revenge of the Sith, bringing yet another digital computer animated character to life, which being General Grievous. And by God, you know, because what would come after General Grievous? Oh yeah, but until we get there. But to finish up on Revenge of the Sith, yeah. With what was brought to Revenge of the Sith, and at that time, it would be the last Star Wars film we would see. Besides, like, say, when, yeah, Clone Wars came along and we had the Clone Wars movie, I'm talking, say, live action Star Wars on the big screen, yeah, that would be the last one for now. Until, of course, the sequel trilogy. But yeah. And after Revenge of the Sith, that was it. And yeah, ILM was not going to do another Star Wars movie for a long time. And not to mention, at a certain point, and after the release of Revenge of the Sith, Lucas himself would move the company to a much better location in San Francisco. No longer residing at Kerner, although technically Kerner did stay around, you know, the practical effects division, and some of the later films that they would find themselves involved in, like, you know, most notably Transformers and, well, Pirates of the Caribbean. But yeah, yeah, the new location that they would go to, because, yeah, being in San Francisco, which, yeah, being, you know, of course, yeah, like, yeah, at the Letterman Digital Arts Center in the Presidio, if I'm even pronouncing that right, but yeah, you know. So yeah, they would move to this new location, and unfortunately, they wouldn't really have a practical effects division at this new location that they would now reside at in San Francisco, but yeah. And how that was almost about to come to an era. It would get there eventually, just, yeah, where, yeah, there was no going back, and, well, even hence the title of Episode 3. But, to get back on a positive note, because, yeah, when it would come to the next 2 installments of Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, well, 2 big things that are brought up for Dead Man's Chest and At World's End in Episode 3. Well, obviously, one of them being yet another extraordinary, outstanding digital character that was brought to life, and with the use of motion capture, Davy Jones. Yes. But before I get to Davy Jones, because can't forget to mention this, because yeah, at a certain point, especially in the early 2000s, there were competitors that stepped in, most notably, like, say, Digital Domain, and most notably, Weta. Weta, according to those at ILM, was their biggest competitor. And the rest that appear in Episode 3, because, yeah, I mentioned Hal, but also, there's also, I didn't mention him either, yeah, Moen Leo. Yeah, if I said his first name right. Him working as a CG artist. But there's also Janet Lewin, whom she's the ILM general manager. So yeah, she was the one that brought up on the whole thing of, you know, that Weta was their biggest competitor. Weta being the same visual effects house that would do, say, the Lord of the Rings films, even when they would do the visual and CG effects for the first Avatar film. Yeah. But, yeah, so with competitors stepping in, and at that time, before those competitors stepped in, ILM was really the only visual effects house that was, you know, in the business. They were doing all of this. But then when, say, Digital Domain, Weta, and a couple of others stepped in, yeah. But at the same time, you know, they did some fantastic work. Even someone, you know, from who once worked at ILM made his way and would be one of the main guys of Weta. So yeah. Also, to mention more about Hal T. Hickel, well, because knowing his background and where he came from, and the fact that he would start off working as a stop-motion animator, like most notably working with Will Vinton himself, the late Will Vinton, most notably doing the California Raisins, and eventually when he would find his way into ILM. So I just wanted to mention that. Just don't want to leave anybody off. Yeah, and so, like, when talking some about Lord of the Rings and what was brought to Gollum, which was originally at first being done at ILM with this new software, and which would be brought to Gollum with the skin texture and, you know, really going at it with making Gollum so detailed in The Two Towers and The Return of the King. And it's thanks to Gollum that this pitched for ILM, convincing them, yeah, to do Davy Jones. And yeah, with Gore Verbinski returning to the director's chair, doing the next 2 installments, and working alongside with ILM again, yes. So on the subject of Davy Jones, well, this was yet another big challenge for ILM. What they had to bring Davy Jones to life. Yeah, and because with the motion capture performance of Bill Nighy, and the fact, because, you know, the texture and detail they had to bring to Davy Jones, along with the Flying Dutchman crew, the idea that this cursed crew, they have a disease and, you know, they become a part of the sea, like they look like sea creatures and such, and each of them looking very different. And when it comes to, say, the captain of the Flying Dutchman, Davy Jones, the look and design that would be brought to him, and when bringing him to life on the screen, and especially like when it came to, say, the tentacles, that was yet another big task, but they succeeded because they have to have a personality of their own. Like, they have to be alive as well, you know, a mannerism to their own, just, yeah, interacting and such. And, you know, the final results of Davy Jones turned out really good. And even when, like, you know, because ILM working on the effects for both Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, those 2 films being filmed back-to-back, just, yeah. But, of course, like, say, when it came to the Oscars, winning that Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and, yeah. And even according to Hal, because they managed to succeed on wowing audiences with Davy Jones, like, yeah, and how he best describes it. And then when it came to, say, At World's End, once again bringing Davy Jones and the Flying Dutchman crew to life, but also another big thing that's brought up for At World's End in the 3rd installment of the Pirates films, and that especially goes for John Knoll, the whirlpool, because, yeah, the climax where, well, yeah, technically, because, you know, where you have the Flying Dutchman and the Black Pearl fighting, and they're in this whirlpool, and the first results of the whirlpool didn't look that good, especially to Gore Verbinski's taste and liking, because there was one thing of the whirlpool where, according to Gore Verbinski, from his point of view, well, yeah, kind of, it looked like, say, a toilet flushing, and it looked like the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman looked like models in a toilet and such, and yeah, it just didn't satisfy Gore, and pushing John to the limit just to do better. And, you know, John understood the message loud and clear, and one of the final results of the whirlpool was having the whirlpool be flat like a pancake and flipping it upside down and such, and hey, the final results of the whirlpool in the climax where, yeah, you have the Flying Dutchman and the Black Pearl going at it, there's cannon fire, and each of the characters boarding the Dutchman and the Black Pearl, and the final battle with Davy Jones, Elizabeth Swann, Will Turner, Jack Sparrow, and when, yeah, it comes to Davy Jones's heart, just excellent. And the fact that the behind the scenes of the battle between the Dutchman and the Pearl, the biggest blue screen set that even John Knoll had never seen before. You know, it was amazing. And, you know, keep in mind, because at that time, At World's End was the most expensive film to do. But look at the final results of At World's End. Amazing. And, you know, I don't know, because even as of today, I don't know, because, you know, granted, At World's End, it may not be right up there with, say, the first 2 pirate films, but that's not to say it's a bad Pirates movie. Nowhere near, like, say, for a lot of people, most notably Stranger Tides. But, yeah, anyways. But, yeah, the final results at World's End, and of course Dead Man's Chest, the last two pirate films at that time, and to go out with a bang, and yeah, because even Gore Verbinski himself stating that to go out with a bang is with, yeah, the Whirlpool and such as, yeah, and, you know, that being, again, those being the last two for now, and, you know, going on a high note. So yeah, again, the final results of, say, Dead Man's Chest and At World's End turned out to be extraordinary. And what would come next for ILM? Well, because, yeah, further on, the more films that they would do, and, you know, I wish, but, you know, even though we had season 1, they talked so much and such, even when, yeah, the 2010s rolled in and when, say, The Mandalorian came in, yeah, but it still would have been nice if they brought up some more in season 2, but I get it, I understand. It still turned out great. So, like, one of the next big things that would come for ILM, well, because, yeah, the more films that they were doing after Pirates, even when, like, say, they were considering at one point to do the visual/CG effects for Avatar, and they were bidding on it. But at a certain point, they turned it down because they weren't willing to take that risk because it was enormous. It's big. Because, yeah, seeing Avatar, it is a big environment, and with what James Cameron had envisioned for the world of Pandora, but of course, Weta stepping in, and they did a good job. Yeah. So, one of the next big things that would come for ILM, when they would reunite, yet again, with good old Gore Verbinski. Yes, and I was happy that, when watching this episode for the first time, I was so happy that, you know, they brought this up, because this was yet another big thing / a big moment in ILM's history, when they would do their first animated feature film. And that, of course, being the Oscar-winning animated film, Rango. Yes, good old Rango, because when Rango was brought up, yet another big thing that's brought up in the history of ILM and in the third and final episode of Season 2. Well, because, yeah, what goes down in Rango? The fact that, well, ILM, they've never done this kind of thing before, nor has Gore Verbinski. He never directed an animated feature until now, and it was a challenge, not just for Gore, but for also those at ILM. And the fact that Gore wanted to know those at ILM so well, like a family, and, you know, them really putting their heart and soul into Rango, what was put into it from beginning to end. So much detail, the animation style to Rango, and even when, like, how they performed with the actors. Like Verbinski, according to those at ILM, Verbinski didn't want the actors and actresses to record in a, you know, booth and such. And to Gore Verbinski's liking, and he was comfortable with this, like having the cast and crew be there on set with props, and they would use microphone sticks, you know, and to record the dialogue and with whatever it was that was happening. And also the emotional crew, yeah, I think that's what it's called. Like, yeah, that was more of a joke, but it's understandable, and well, that being very exclusive just for this movie, because yeah, and what's brought up by those at ILM and what they specifically say about that. But yeah, I actually didn't quite realize that emotional crew and such, you know. But anyways, so yeah, just like the work and effort that was put into Rango. You know, fun fact, and I wish that the documentary would have brought this up. Before Rango, ILM was originally at one point actually going to do an animated film somewhere in the late 90s. Yeah, this had to do something with, I think, Frankenstein. Yeah, but that didn't come to be. That ended up being canceled. But fast forward in around like 2010 and 11, ILM would do their first fully computer animated film, which being, well, Rango. And just, yeah, overall, the effort that was put into Rango from the start and at the end, what they did, those at ILM making this extraordinary, outstanding computer animated film like no one had seen before, and best said by Verbinski and the others, this was no Disney, no Pixar, no Illumination, no DreamWorks. This was something very different, and that's good. Yeah, just amazing. Yeah, and that's the last big thing that's brought up, because what's brought up next after talking about Rango? Well, also, not to mention that when doing, like test footage, like they did this at Gore Verbinski's house, and when pitching this to ILM, just wanted to throw that out. So, yeah. So after talking about Rango, well, one of the last things that's brought up in episode 3, yeah, we're near the end of episode 3. Well, because at a certain point, and in 2023, one of the original locations of ILM, Kerner, was soon to be closing, and it did. And, well, yeah, and to speed things up some, because, yeah, having a farewell party, those at ILM, like those that still reside in ILM, or those that have left/retired ILM, coming back, reuniting, where this all began. You know, even with the new people that, you know, they were there when they were still at Kerner, but, you know, you get my point, yeah. All of them there for the farewell party, and just, yeah, I mean, it was a sad era. Like, it was a sad end of an era for ILM that they were no longer going to be doing this, with the practical divisions department being shut down, and, you know, of course, the fact that they moved to a new location, which being in San Francisco, yeah. It's obvious that it was a sad day for those at ILM, that a good era of ILM was coming to an end, and, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes all good things must come to an end. But yeah, the farewell party, and all of those that are there, even Joe Johnson. We finally get to see Joe Johnson on screen, and bringing up about, say, Empire Strikes Back, and one of the first things that was done at the practical divisions, like, yeah, and how he puts at it was the first Boba Fett outfit. It was all white and such. And even Joe bringing up that, you know, they had just filmed the last interview for Season 2 of Light and Magic. And each of the people of ILM giving speeches, most notably John Knoll. We finish up episode 3 with John Knoll, with the speech he gives to those at ILM, and, you know, John Knoll's one of those last people that gets to talk right before the episode finishes, and with the end credits, just, oh, yeah. Episode 3 was fantastic, yeah. Overall, yeah, and to go ahead and finish, yeah. Episode 3, there's no going back. Another great episode, and that being the third and final episode of Light and Magic. And to all those that were a part of this documentary, and if anybody I did miss, oh yeah, because, oh my gosh, how did I forget to mention this? They do also bring up War of the Worlds, yeah. Even though, because, yeah, like, why was that not in the description / the story? Okay, so, my bad, to bring up War of the Worlds, you know, from 2005 with Tom Cruise, Spielberg, yeah. ILM, you know, making another great achievement when they did War of the Worlds, because, yeah, and to speed things up, because, like, when it came to, say, like, one bridge that was being destroyed, the practical houses that were destroyed by flying vehicles, this amazing camera shot where, you know, using some 360, you have the three main characters, one of them being Tom Cruise, in this van. What was achieved, and Dennis Muren had heavy involvement in War of the Worlds. It was fantastic. It really was. And, yeah, according to Dennis Muren, that was one of his favorites that he worked on, his favorite movies, and so on. And the fact that most of them they had seen, of course, the 1953 version of War of the Worlds, and what they would bring to this remake. It was amazing. And with, you know, the aliens and their crafts and that come out of the ground, it's extraordinary. But, yeah, so good thing I remembered to bring up War of the Worlds. So, but, yeah, anybody else that I didn't mention, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I mentioned almost a lot of them. Like, those that make quick appearances, like in episode 1. Like, J.J. Abrams made an appearance. Ron Howard did, just, yeah. Anybody else that I left off, just, yeah. Even those that appear in archival footage, like Pablo Hellman, Tom Cruise, Bill Nighy, Johnny Depp, just, yeah. And Maya Kayser, yeah, her too, and some of them, yeah. Not all of the ILM crew being there for the documentary, but through the use of archive footage. As I mentioned, Maya Kayser, Patricia Rose Duganan, if I'm even saying her last name right, Jacob Pastecki, and yeah, and a couple of others. Also, yeah, Joe Lettery, forgot to mention him because, yeah, his appearance in the documentary and what he talks about, because, yeah, his part in ILM being visual effects supervisor. So, yeah. And, of course, George Lucas himself, and also Rick McCallum, and Jim Morris, Dennis Muren, Rob Coleman, John Knoll, all of those that got to be a part of this, and Kathleen Kennedy being there too, just, yeah. Yeah, again, episode 3 of season 2, there's no going back. It was excellent. A great way to wrap up season 2. Just, yeah, overall, Season 2 of Light and Magic was excellent. I really enjoyed this, and again, as I said earlier, this would probably be my favorite season of Light and Magic. Again, no hard feelings on Season 1. It was fantastic. I'm just saying. I enjoy both, but especially, I enjoy Season 2. But just, I hate to do, like, a competition, which is my very favorite. Alright. But yeah, again, what was brought into Season 2, the further stories that are told in the history of ILM when it came to, say, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s, and doing computer, animation, visual effects, and they would get better as the years went on, becoming better than ever. They were put to the challenges / the tasks, but they achieved them when it came to the prequels, Pirates of the Caribbean, War of the Worlds, Rango, Dragonheart, need I go on, just fantastic. And knowing a lot more on those that work at ILM and what they're like and the divisions and the parts that they play in ILM, just fantastic. Really is. Again, Season 2 of Light and Magic, fantastic. And also, what a great way to end off Season 2 with, the farewell party at Kerner. Just, the original location of Lucasfilm. Well, Industrial Light and Magic, that is. But, So, I'm giving Season 2 of Light and Magic, well, what the heck, if it's not obvious, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Season 2 of Light and Magic. And what about you guys? What did you think of Season 2 of Light and Magic itself? Were any of you like me? I have a good feeling you were on the same page as me, where you had no idea and didn't think that we were going to get a Season 2 unless, unbeknownst to me, it was announced earlier, but I just didn't really know. Not until, when the trailer came out and when, say, it was brought up at Star Wars Celebration Japan, etc. The fact is, another thing from ILM is them having a new book out and so on. What were some of your favorite topics that were brought up in the 3 episodes of Season 2? And some things that you didn't know about and you were fascinated and memorized with. Your experience seeing those movies that ILM brought the magic to, and that's brought up in Season 2. And any moments that, you laughed and you got emotional, and with the finale of Episode 3, what more do I have to say? Overall, what do you think of Season 2 itself of Light and Magic, and with what I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Season 2 of Light and Magic. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. Take care. Happy anniversary to Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM for short. Peace out, and may the Force be with you.